Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
Bro, that's rock and roll. It's already going the side of the Authentically Detroit experience. I feel it already. So let's see. Let's do classic Detroit is Different. Oh, man. Welcome back to Detroit is Different, the podcast. And this one has been brewing up for a while, all right? So when I say it's been brewing up for a while, I always say like, oh, you're going to like this one. You're going to like this one. Okay, this is one you need to listen to just because if you are a Detroiter and you want to piece together some of the stories and appreciate some of what I give with some roots and everything, that's the roots. But as they always say, history is happening now, meaning like right now, that second that you just was second out and saying to yourself like, damn, history just happened. History just happened, meaning that Detroit history is happening now. And if a podcast were to be called that, and I think that that would be something that it's like I would connect with, but it wouldn't be as connecting as the name of this one. It's real. It's true. It's genuine, but more so it's authentic. Authentically Detroit. You got two hosts of that event. Podcast, the experience. And that is Mr. Orlando Bailey that you're very familiar with, but also Donna Givens. Donna, how are you today? How are you, Orlando? Authentically Detroit. Welcome over to Detroit is Different. How y'all feeling?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, everything's cool, Mr. Bailey.
I have to say, I think that was the best intro the podcast has ever gotten from anybody.
Hilarious.
I was feeling all right, but I feel great after hearing you describe the Authentically Detroit experience. I've never heard us being described as an experience. I feel good. That feels nice. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
thank you for that. I received that.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that, and you are a wordsmith, so thank you.
Thank you. It's experiential. Trust me.
Yeah.
It is very experiential because I sit and I listen. So it's a couple different podcasts I follow on beat, but theirs is something that I think that as anything's happening around Detroit politically and around community, this is a voice you want to connect with. It's other tracks that do exist, but also bringing in some of these people. So you're going to get to actually hear from Charity Dean herself about some of what's happening and not just necessarily read it in a headline or get it where it's so topical, but it's really framed around what's happening in Detroit. So if you're wondering what's happening, this is the space and place, which leads to Donna. Donna, I've already had Orlando in here sharing some of his experiences and all. You and your experience, your roots to the city of Detroit, your peoples. How did y'all get to the D?
Well, on my mother's side of the family, her great-grandmother, Sarah, moved here with her great-uncle because he was escaping a lynch mob.
Oh, man.
And so they came to Detroit in the around 1919 and lived here. My grandmother, my mother's mother, lived in Tennessee. Her family was from Alabama, but they had moved to Tennessee, to Memphis, and her father was a mattress maker. And so her mother died in childbirth, and she moved north to live with her grandmother, Sarah. And so my grandmother, who was born in 1912, moved here that way.
So you have some roots that go back for real to the city.
I'm back, okay?
Like 1912. That's like the fur coat.
Yeah.
It's like the fur industry of Detroit. You know what I'm saying? That was for show. And neighborhood. What neighborhood were they?
Well, so my mama Sarah owned a house that was on somewhere close to, my mother said, I-75 and 6 Mile. So her neighborhood is a freeway. People talk about Black Bottom, but the freeways wiped out a lot of home ownership, and she actually became a homeowner, which is something that
I was
really proud of. And she ended up moving into the Virginia Park area, and there's stories about during the rebellion. My aunt was living upstairs with my cousin on the 3rd floor of this 2-family flat, and they were spraying the roof of their home with water to stop it from burning. So
wow.
On Atkinson Street. So there's a lot of rich history on that side. I don't know how my mother's father got here, but I know that he was born in Detroit. I don't know how his people got here. I know that his mother was Cameroonian, and so she really prided herself on being a pure African and not being, mixed up like these other folks. But my grandfather never knew his father. So, that's on that side. On my father's side, my grandparents moved here in, I want to say, 1925. My grandfather was from Indianapolis. His mother, he was orphaned and ended up being raised by his mother's sister's husband. So his aunt and uncle, Mr. Archie Greathouse in Indianapolis. Archie Greathouse was a numbers runner. And so my grandfather grew up living well.
Okay, that is like a numbers running name, Archie
Greathouse. So if you look him up, Mr. Greathouse in Indianapolis, he was what they call a race man in Indianapolis. So he actually sued the school board for racial discrimination on behalf of the NAACP. He invested in a lot of things, and he was really big on education, but he also was a numbers runner and a saloon keeper. And so my grandfather ended up going to the University of Indiana. He was able to go to college. He was able to complete high school thanks to this numbers runner in the family. And he ended up becoming a doctor. He was a Kappa. He was one of the first line when they became Kappa Alpha Psi. Donovan Heston Givens Sr. So it's not hard to trace those names, right? And so he came here with my grandmother, Lillian Givens, who was in East St. Louis. And his people were from Kentucky, her people were from Georgia, and they ended up in East St. Louis. And again, my grandmother was born in 1898, my father's mother. So my people are old, right? Yeah. My grandmother would be quite old right now, but they got married, they moved to Chicago, and you couldn't make money as a doctor in Chicago. So they came to Detroit because auto workers had money. And, Dr. Sweet was here. He was a frat brother to my grandfather, and they were both doctors. And so he came here and opened up a medical practice. And, so my people have been here since 1919 in some way, shape, or form. But all of my grandparents were here by 1925, 1926.
And also, let me say this, too. Staples of Black culture. So anybody that's ever been to East St. Louis, staple in Black culture. And Memphis too. It's like just blackness, it's like, boy.
Exactly.
Your family reunion could be like a barbecue a barbecue off.
Oh my goodness, if only I knew how to do that. But my East St. Louis was Detroit before Detroit was Detroit. Memphis was Detroit before Detroit was Detroit. It was where people stopped on their way up north, right? And so East St. Louis, I didn't realize that in 1917 there was a riot in East St. Louis. And by riot, I mean that's the racial pogrom where white people kill every black person in sight. And my grandmother's father in East St. Louis, he was a plainclothes police detective. And so he actually had to give testimony about what happened during this abuse of black people. But her brother, Horace, had a saloon, and so he was arming people, and he was driving down the street giving guns to black people. And so a lot of black people were fighting back then, and several of them went to prison, and they were blamed for fomenting the riot because they did things that angered white people, like wanting to form their own political party and other things that established Black pride. So I think it's safe to say that my family was one that was rooted in Black pride long before I was here.
And business, organizing, a couple of different things that still stand in your works today.
My grandmother was a wild one now. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was really an organizer. And so she was part of this organization. I think it's called A Place of Our Own. But she was working with Mr. Takahashi from the Black Dragon Society, which was also instrumental in the formation of the Nation of Islam. And so if you read books about the Nation of Islam, you'll read about Sato Takahashi or something like that. And my grandmother left her husband, my grandfather, and her 4 children and moved in with this man for a while. And so that also, she was my mother
Orlando.
cheaper. Her name, listen, we found out about this because somehow we were reading this history book, and so my cousin sent it around, and it's absolutely the truth. If you look up Cheeber McIntyre, Cheaber McIntyre, that's my grandmother. She was one who was fighting for rights and only wanted to affiliate with people who fought for rights. She ended up, had an FBI file, but growing up when I was a young adult, she had Angela Davis come to her house. She was really good friends with Irma Henderson. She belonged to the Women's Conference of Concerns. JoAnn Watson was telling me amazing things about my grandmother and the way that my grandmother gave to people. And I think that my grandmother, more than any other human being, inspired me into this work. So I always want to honor Mother Cheever, who was orphaned at 10, right? Orphaned at 10 years old, raised by a grandmother, Mama Sarah, raised 4 children. By the time she was 22, she had 4 children. She was always fighting for her freedom and for the freedom of our people. When she was 40, she went to college at Wayne State and became a teacher. And then she taught English, Spanish, and Swahili. And she taught at Mumford High School and used to take her students to Africa on pilgrimages every summer so they could get to know their roots. So my grandmother was an amazing woman. You said, how does a woman who was raised with nothing become what she became? Because they were dirt poor, and she taught her grandmother, Sarah, how to read. So I'm always so proud of my grandmother and, of course, my mother for the way that they exemplified womanhood, leadership, pride in our community, and pride in ourselves. And I just always hope to be somebody who lives up to their standard.
I definitely, okay, it's so many other questions where I'm going to have to definitely get you back just a little alone. But that, as you speak about that start of the Nation of Islam, which roots here in the city of Detroit.
Simple number one.
And some of the stories being shared of it is, you have enough Detroit discussions, you'll find out almost everything you need to know about Black America itself and a lot of Black history, period. But on a podcast, Black Coffee, that we've closed, but myself and Frida Sampson did together for a while. We did an interview with Aurora Harris and I always say Mama and Ned, but Dr. Gloria House, where Aurora is giving her history of her father being one of those founding members of the Nation of Islam and some of the all out, what's the right verbiage here? Some of the attacks, it's just no other way to put it, that a lot of those founding members connected to Fard Muhammad and the followers at the time took from, it wasn't even the FBI then. I think it was like the Justice Council or something like that. Like before the FBI had a name,
Exactly.
there were certain organizations targeted. That was one of them. So I would only imagine that your grandma's file starts definitely then and runs throughout.
There was definitely an FBI file. Now, my grandmother never belonged to the Nation of Islam, but she was definitely a member of the Communist Party, even though she says she wasn't. She was definitely, remember, the Communist Party in Detroit was no joke. The Communist Party in Detroit was fighting for Black rights in places where Black people wouldn't. And so, a lot of our heroes in Detroit had ties to the Communist Party, including Coleman Young, whether they were actually members of the Communist Party or not. There was not this feeling that the worst thing you could be was a communist, okay? And so my grandmother had those ties. She was mostly concerned with liberation. She traveled to every continent. She traveled all over. But when I was a young adult, when she left my her third husband. I got married 3 times like she did. But when she left her third husband, she set a precedent. I had to follow. Somebody had to follow the precedent.
Hilarious.
Only difference is I'm not getting divorced from Kevin because you know what? I managed to strike the right one the third time, right? I'm not out. But when she left her third husband and my mother got divorced, my grandmother moved in with us and we used to get her mail and the mail would come opened. And so, you'd hear little clicks on the phone. And again, Angela Davis was coming to visit us, and we had, I think at one point, Michael Moore came to our house, and she would have these receptions with people. And so she's not somebody like so many Detroiters. This is a beautiful thing about Detroit. Detroit is different because there's so many Detroiters who made history, and nobody knows their name. Yeah. And my grandmother was one of them.
Yeah, I definitely already will have that in the back of my head, just going in different layers and relationships as like a lot of the, I think we were recently in a meeting, which I'm sure we're going to get to closer now, where you spoke directly into something that I've stood on. And I've said that oftentimes as history is captured and delivered back, some assumptions are being made about people. So some of the things is this person was fighting for this and this person did that for that, or this person, whether it be through politics or whether it be through business or whether it be through legal justice. And I'm like, you said it best, and I've been saying this for a while, but you captured it. These people were fighting for freedom. So like those methods at the time were strategies that looked like gateways to freedom.
Right.
But it never was whatever that is. So it's like if you make enough money, then you know what they say. You make enough money, then the white man will look at you and welcome you in.
Black capitalism, yay!
There you go.
But it's so funny because my first memory was 4 years old, the rebellion, 1967. It's the first thing I clearly remember was being told to crawl under the windows. And we lived on Chicago Boulevard and 12th Street at the time. My grandfather had recently passed away. He'd passed away in 1965. We were living with my grandmother on Chicago Boulevard. My father was a doctor. He had a Cadillac, and the riot came. My first memory was driving to Idlewild to get away from Detroit and being stopped by a tank and somebody putting a shotgun up to my father's head. So my father used to tell us growing up, if you are a black person with a PhD, what do they call you? Nigger. If you are a black person, before 444, my father was letting us know that you cannot educate yourself and earn yourself out of the caste system that is called black identity, that it is a permanent cast upon us. And the issue is, can you leave it alone? You cannot exit blackness by yourself. There's so many people who move out to the suburbs, who send their kids to these schools. I have family members who don't use the word black or white because they don't want their children to be color conscious. But I'm very opposite to that. I believe it's important for you to know who and whose you are and your history, and to quit thinking that you can out-earn something that you didn't cause. Racism is not caused because we're not educated.
Yeah.
Racism is caused because people want to exploit our labor, extract our value for their own purposes. And so Detroit is one of these amazing cities that got made to what it is because the Black Detroiters came together and said, no more, not here, not now. And every time we had an opportunity, we used our power collectively to build power for ourselves and our community. And, I'm really proud of that. That is why Detroit is different, right? Because the people are different. And by the people, I mean the black folks in Detroit are different.
All right, so that definitely runs me right into y'all already here in Orlando. We gonna get the presence now. We on the road almost. I just got a couple more questions.
Okay.
In your journey, and then but you already mixing it in. Your neighborhood and where you grew up, you're already giving some hints. What high school, what college, what in your steps of looking at your revolutionary grandmother, are you like, this is my path?
Okay. So we moved to the Bagley neighborhood when I was 4 years old. Soon after the rebellion, we moved on to Pennington. And I went to Sugar and Spice on West McNichols. We called it 6 Mile. And then I went to Bagley, and those were the best days. I loved Bagley Elementary. I tell everybody I love Bagley Elementary, in particular my teacher, Miss Griffey, because Miss Griffey, and yes, this is Michael Griffey's stepmother, so to speak, but Miss Griffey was serious. She wore an afro, and she talked about Black Power, and we were singing the Black National Anthem every week. I won a Black History Oratory contest and got a black ribbon, and that was like the pride of my thing. And so I grew up in a school where we were immersed in Black pride. That was everything about how we grew up, and I just didn't even understand the universe. There was a white girl in my school, and I always felt sorry for her for being white because she stood out. She didn't fit in, and so I tried to be nice to her. And her sister actually went to middle school at Hampton and then Cass Tech with my sister. And when my sister passed away a couple years ago, her sister was there, and she was like, I don't know if you remember my sister. I'm like, of course I do. She was the white girl who went to, she was a very nice girl. But I'm saying that Black pride was the thing in Detroit. There was a house across the street from my elementary school. There was a white house, and it had Black Panther and a spray painted on the outside of the house with the shape of a panther on it. We left and moved out of that neighborhood when I was 10 years old and moved into Palmer Woods. And it was really traumatic for me. because the cohesiveness of Pennington, everybody, was so close to each other. And in Palmer Woods, you go to somebody's house and you had to ring the door and an intercom, who is it? And, they let you in. So I felt very alienated when we moved there. And then I went to Mercy High School, which was even more alienation. Let me say this. I left Bagley when we moved, and I ended up at Immaculate Heart of Mary, which was a Catholic elementary school. We went to a Catholic school for two reasons. One, I kept getting beat up at Hampton when we moved. It was a Hampton Elementary. And two, more importantly, the schools were on strike until October. And so, bunches of Black people left public schools and went to Catholic schools in those years.
And let me say this, yourself, even one of my big homies, Choke Lumumba, the relationship between Black folks and parochial schools, especially if we're thinking like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so much has changed just with charter schools, but there was a strong relationship where depending upon where you go, even like UAD and Jesuit,
That's
really,
right.
like I tell a lot of people, like if you, when it comes to people that are judges and attorneys that I know, and you ask them what high school they went to, the probability if they Black and it's a Black dude attorney and that they went to Jesuit, I would go as far as saying it's pretty high.
Well,
a lot of those sitting judges.
my colleagues, my peers went to Cass. I got to be honest. I did have friends who went to U of D, and I went to Mercy High School. But Cass Tech students are blowing it out the water and are still blowing. I'm so jealous of them. My sister graduated from Cass Tech, and she was always on the reunion committee, so she'd invite me to their reunions. And I'd be like, well, dang. When Mercy had its 40th reunion, nobody came. We were like, no, why bother? And then it was my job to try to get some of the Black girls who went to Mercy with me to come back, and nobody wanted to come back. But, elementary school, a lot of people went to Jesu, for example, elementary school, or other Catholic elementary schools and headed to Cass Tech.
Yeah, that
But
definitely
Catholic
happened.
schools were really what charter schools are today, except, my Catholic school wasn't a great school, but I will say that some great people came out of my middle school. Keith Ellison, Congressman Keith Ellison, now Attorney General Keith Ellison, went to IHM with me. And there are many people who did really well and did great things, not because of the education we got at IHM, but despite it. But, Keith went on to U of D, and I went to Mercy High School and left there and went to the University of Michigan. But I was, my grandmother's granddaughter. My mother had gotten her social work degree while I was in high school. And I used to joke with her, I got a social work degree along with her because I talked to her. I was a mama's girl, right? And so she told me everything she learned. And I got to U of M, and I was studying, I was in the Black Studies department, sociology department, and I graduated with a political science degree. And my first job upon graduation was working at the Community Health Awareness Group. Linda Campbell was at the AIDS department. George Gaines was at the health department. Linda was over the AIDS project. And my mother was the social worker for the city of Detroit for HIV/AIDS.
Wow.
And I'm going to talk about this.
And what era?
We're talking about 1983.
83. So this is like before it's even it's at the height of it impacting so many communities, but it wasn't as popular in the minds of talked about.
It was talked about because people were dying. And everybody was deathly afraid of getting HIV/AIDS, such that at my mother's homegoing, Linda Campbell spoke about the fact they could not find a social worker who was willing to work with people with AIDS because they were always afraid that it would be contagious if you sat near a person. But my mother was a person who loved people. I think if you could say anything about Shirley Elizabeth McIntyre, it is that she loved without fail, and she believed in people. She had not a discriminatory bone in her body. And so she's going into this epidemic, which is considered at this time a gay disease, and she's showing love to, injection drug users, returning citizens, and she modeled that for me, right? But she was a social worker for the AIDS department. I think it's important to understand what that means. I was trained while working for the Community Health Awareness Group, which is an organization that the health department formed. I was trained to do pre and post test counseling for people at risk of AIDS, right? Or HIV infection, as we called it. My mother trained us. So before somebody took the test, I would give them counseling, explaining what the test was, talking to them about the risk and all of that. And if they got a negative result, I could deliver the news. If they got a positive result, all of them received those results from my mother. My 4'11" mother was responsible for telling person after person after person after person, you are positive for HIV. Men who had never told their partners that they were having sex with men. People who were injection drug users. Women who had no idea their partners were any of that. My mother was responsible for that. And then I was responsible for running the support group. Once they were identified, Dr. Crane at the University Health Center at Detroit Receiving Hospital would send them to us. And I ran the support group talking to people at a time when AIDS was a death sentence. You didn't survive it. There was no cure. And Black people had the shortest lifespans, and Black women lived on average for 6 months after diagnosis. And it was my job to run the support group. So it sounds really grim. And it was, but it was a beautiful experience because I got to meet people from all walks of life. I got to meet returning citizens. I got to meet a woman who was a street sex worker, Lily, brilliant, funny. She used to make me laugh so hard I was crying. And they would all say, I'm living better now than I've ever lived. This is the best time in my life because they had this sense of community. And most of the people we were dealing with had some breaks. Some losses, they were abused and thrown out as children. They were raped as children. They had stories on stories on stories, and they talked about them, and I got to hear them at a very young age and was really moved by that, first of all, because they died, but secondly, because of how they lived and who they were. And here I had gone to University of Michigan, the leaders and the best, and I'm talking to people who had more intelligence and knowledge than anybody I went to college with. I was like, well, dang. College doesn't make you smart. I learned at a young age that college does not make you smart, that God made you smart, and that college is a place for you to practice and hone your skills. And I imagine, what if all of these brilliant people in this room who are dying right now had lived differently when they were young? What would we do? And that actually is what kind of propelled me to do the work that I'm doing now, because I wanted to imagine a future we could do an intervention, sort of like Back to the Future, in people's lives and make them different. And that's been kind of what has motivated me for my entire career, is wanting to make a difference, wanting to help people who the world has told are nothing, find there's something, believe in themselves, wanting to uplift Black people very specifically, against all of the stigma and the lies that are told about who we are as people, wanting people to see themselves as whole and worthy and contributing. And, it's been a wonderful career doing that despite a lot of hiccups along the way.
Oh man, you just laid out so much, and it's so many things that I would want to dig further, but I'm going to say that definitely, which this will just propel right into our next question, which I'm laying on Orlando. As they say, what is it? If America got a cold, then Black people got the flu. So whatever challenges that are American challenges will directly impact the Black community tenfold. The relationship between the healthcare industry and health work in the Black community has justifiable reasons to be so strained, but so many other institutions as well. So knowing that you and your mother and Linda and so many others were present at those times early on in the 80s, and like I say, I'm so young, but I'm reading the information about what it is, and it took like the other side of the 80s where people know, like, okay, this is what's happening. This is how we can interpret it. Some of the packaging of how that was still has vestiges of impacts today towards a lot of things. So doing that work is beyond like admirable. And it's so needed, and we're still present with that. So and when we think about some of the stories today and what's still needed, because some of the stuff is, as you say, that these people that at the time, just due to other conditions and everything in play, are looking at the idea of, okay, I may die in 6 months, but the whole concept that I can connect and be valued and seen and have community is providing me with these last days, my best days. And that speaks so strong to me. And that's where I'm coming to Orlando to say, like, okay, community being that important. And I know it's like, Orlando, like, damn, why are you coming to me? But I want you to speak a little bit about this whole space of community existing for Black folks and being seen and being heard, and how that can be so substantive to a person dealing with whatever.
I think intrinsic in every human being is this desire to be seen, heard, and understood. And I think there are folks who are divinely gifted to gift that to folks. And what we know is intrinsic within the Black community is that we are literally the antithesis of this rugged individualism that white supremacy tries to force on us. We've always been community. We've always been communal, right? And so in community, what I've been saying, at least for the last 2 years, is that love is required. Right. I think what Donna is really speaking to without having said the words is that love for herself, love for her people, love for community, love for Black people was instilled in her before she even was thought of, before you were even a vapor. Right. And for Donna and for us to do the work that we do, but, you know, even going back to, you know, Donna's work with Community Health Awareness Group, you know, being able to see past what the label was and see folks' humanity, right? Their humanity at the core, and love them enough to support them. And I think, you know, part of what I think we try to do at Authentically Detroit and what we do is we influence the lexicon within Detroit about certain issues and certain communities and how we talk about it, right? It's really up until recently, even to just circle back to the HIV and AIDS thing, that we've begun to change our lexicon and our thought processes about what it is and how we talk about it, right? Because the lexicon was adversarial and it othered an entire community, right? It alienated an entire community. And we are now just coming through to being able to talk about it in a positive way. And, you know, it's not a death sentence anymore. And it's, you know, we have more fact. I think what we try to do in community and within Black people, and that's why we are in the business of podcasting and narrative, is influence the lexicon about who we are. Right, the conversation and the narrative about who Detroit is, what Detroit was, and what Detroit could be. Right. And we do that, you know, in an unedited, really raw way. Yeah.
All right. I know Donna got some.
I think it's important to talk about privilege, right? Mm-hmm. Because Absolutely. You can't talk about my life without acknowledging that I've had privilege other people have not.
Absolutely.
I had the privilege of growing up in a household where people knew where the food was, where who was going to pay the rent, knowing I was going to college, having my parents have a way to pay for me to go to college, going to private schools. That's all privilege. And then, you know, to a certain extent, although we don't talk about this, you know, light skin privilege, right? Because there's certain people who didn't see me in a certain kind of way. I think we can't get away from that. I think the other thing, though, is the question is not acknowledging it, it's what do you do with it? Mm-hmm. First thing you do is you have to acknowledge it. But I think the other thing you have to do is acknowledge that even within what seems like privilege, there's a lot of brokenness in our people. We suffered 400 years of being enslaved. And, you know, yes, my father was a doctor, but his stories about all of the abuses he suffered and everything he suffered, even as the son of a doctor to get where he was, are significant. And so how do we come together as a community and see each other without minimizing each other, without using our experiences to oppress somebody? Because, you know, was it Willie Lynch keeps us divided? How do we come together to become whole as a people? I think that Eugene Robinson wrote a book, Disintegration. And in his book, Disintegration, he talked about the way that we are increasingly separated into groups. You have your new Negroes who are, you know, either immigrants or biracial who aren't quite sure that they're like these other Black folks, right? And you have your transcendent people who've transcended race, who see race as kind of optional. And then you have your middle-class Black people who are doing fairly well, who socially distanced themselves from poor Black folks. And then you have poor Black folks who have become the invisible scourge of our community. They're the ones we're all trying to escape from. They're the ones we blame everything on. And as long as we do that, we are going to be conquered. We're going to be weak. And so one of the things that when we talk about community, we've also got to do is we've got to start bringing people back together in community where they're hearing each other and seeing their commonalities and understanding that we are all Black people.
And speaking to that is why, like when people say like, man, you all do like these different events and everything, and it's like that's always the pulse. It's using culture as the gateway to at least bring folks together, and then from those spaces, we can start with what we do agree with, and then get into other veins. Because that's really the root of why Detroit is different really exists. Because my experiences in Detroit have been so different than a lot of the other people I know. And I feel this is a very, as you talk about segmented, this is still a very cliquish town. And some of those cliques you don't even know, like I just examples, like, you know, you'll go 4 blocks over and you'll find like, wow, it's like a whole group of these people that have been doing this specific hobby for the matter of like 4 generations or 5 generations, but not even connected to this other group that's doing the same thing. And I think we do thrive in that unity. We do thrive in community. That's where that's when we're at our best, but it's still a lot of pain that does exist. We got to recognize what America is for what it is, which goes to the next question.
But you know, I want to say this.
Okay, speak.
All these different groups, we all eat greens.
Yeah, that's part of, yes.
And, you know, and we all care about our hair.
Yes.
And so you have found these commonalities to bring people together over what we have in common. Because, you know, listen, your hair your greens, all of that is so powerful simply because it draws on things that don't separate us, things that we can actually come together. And I want to commend you for that.
Thank you. And shout out to like my whole team. It's somebody that definitely is fan with y'all, but like Suzanne helps with a lot of this. Let's see. So many people, the nephews, Demarie, like the team that's growing in bits and pieces as we solidify, my family that comes and supports. But this is what it's about. Because it's like if we can use culture as that platform and then get people there, and then we can give them a little bit of something else. I don't expect everyone to sit and pontificate about the points of how community benefits ordinance can directly impact the Black community, but we can get them together and we can give them some nuggets of what that is, and then we can grow upon that.
And you know what? You can give people the good feeling of being together. Because there's
too.
something about us being together as one where you always just walk away feeling good about being a Black person, right? And it's not, we don't have enough opportunities to come together like that.
So one of those things that like I definitely want to get into when I think of both these podcasts, because right now it's election 2024 for the America and the world looking at, which is interesting. But right after that, we always know after the big election year of whoever's going to be president comes the very next year of who's going to be mayor of Detroit, who's going to be city council, who's going to be on the police commission, which our police commission really needed a lot more of that information that we're going to definitely pour a lot of sauce. At this, definitely will stand Authentically Detroit. Detroit is different. Others will step in. You know, Bridge Detroit will be there. I expect Axio somewhat, but I believe that the voices we're going to carry will definitely carry into community in a different way. Looking at this and what people know, just heading in. Me and Orlando already sort of had this. What should people be thinking? Because people are sitting around saying, you know what, I want to do something. I want to be a city council member. I want to be a police commissioner. What are some of the things people should be thinking? What would you all like to see from some of that?
You know, Larry Simmons, our friend Larry Simmons over there on the West Side, said to me one time, he said, some people run from office because they want to do something. And some people run for office because they want to be something. So
wow, that's very deep.
It was very deep. And when you're running for office because you want to do something, I think those are the people I want to trust, right? Because you're going in there with a point of view, and you're not going to be so susceptible to the influence of people who are trying to lobby you and change your mind and get you into their way of thinking. Sometimes people are a little bit of a mix of both. But I think the first thing that we should do, and I've said this to you, Orlando, and any group of people, and I'm hoping we can do this together, quite frankly, Carrie, I know that we're talking about this, is listen to people. Orlando says it's innate. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. People who are voting, people who aren't voting, don't feel understood or listened to by the people who run for office and who represent them today.
So I have this question to that, because, I always have these practical questions. Can you give an example of a candidate that you feel like really did hear the people and responded well to it?
I'm not
within the city?
It could be the city, it could be federal, it could be whomever, like a political figure that you think responded well to a response. Because I got somebody in my mind.
It's about a political figure right now. I think I really do think it's about the current conditions on the pavements of neighborhoods, and not about trying to identify who that person or who this figure is, who have heard us in the past and who will hear us currently. I think right now, what has always been on the back burner is the expertise and the experience of residents who are directly impacted by policies that happen at the city hall level, at the state level, and at the national level. And if we can get if we can get and give voice to that resident, if we can figure out what's ailing them, what that tension point is, I think then we can go about the work of identifying someone to make them listen.
So this is wait. When I say this, I meant more so just any frame of reference. Give me an example of of whom that was. So it could be
Watson.
JoAnn Watson.
JoAnn Watson.
JoAnn Watson.
Speak to why?
Yes.
Why
JoAnn
and how?
Watson,
And I mean, you're
JoAnn
not
Watson.
pushing back, my guy.
JoAnn Watson was fearless. She was clear about who she stood for and why. She was unafraid to go against anybody.
And she was accountable.
She was accountable. She used her position to advocate for people at the city council table. If a developer wanted to do something in the neighborhoods that, those of us were working and living in, she said, who are you working with in that neighborhood? And if they couldn't come up with a name and a relationship, the answer was no. You can't have the land, you can't have the money, you can't have anything.
One second, I got to stop. I like what Donna just said. I want to reiterate because I like that point. So if you're looking to develop in a neighborhood, you should have a standing relationship. Now, when does that relationship start?
I mean, the relationship starts whenever, if you're coming to that community, get to know the people in that community and have a credible relationship with somebody who has credible connections to people who are living and working in that community. But also give opportunities for people who are in the community to be the ones to initiate that relationship. I'm trying to do something. I don't necessarily have the know-how. You do. Can you work with me and help me so we can do this together? I think that when developers and others understand that that is what's needed and wanted at the city council table, that that's what's needed and wanted from the mayor, then they begin to behave differently. Coleman Young is another example. I mean, how can we not say Coleman? Coleman Young here, he is mayor of Detroit, and he's not letting a bank sit down with him unless there's a black person there. He's not letting a foundation, he's not letting a corporation really have influence in this city if they don't have strong black representation. And you started seeing not only black attorneys being influential. My brother-in-law used to work for Lewis, White & Clay, and Lewis, White & Clay was one of the biggest law firms in town. Why? Because if you wanted to do business, it helped to work with a black law firm. It helped to bank with a black bank. It helped to have these black executives. And as the administration of the city of Detroit has become colorblind, all of a sudden, black architecture firms, black law firms no longer have any particular value in helping to close deals and helping to get the attention of people at the city level. Even if it's not, you have to have this black person here. But if you need people who can get the neighborhood support, then you're going to have to hire people who understand how the neighborhoods function. We have been made largely irrelevant. If you look at who is working in the planning department. I'm not talking about the person who's at the top of the planning department. If you're looking at who's working there, if you're looking at who's working at the Growth Corporation and a lot of these entities that are creating these deals that are coming into our city, the people who are there, even if they're Black, are not Black people from Detroit.
So let's start here. I like this is definitely getting into, like I say, you knew this was going to be an authentic discussion. So I'm going back to Orlando, and I know Donna going to definitely be able to speak directly to this because this is from Donna's position at the helm of ECN, Eastside Community Network. When that developer is thinking in that idea, as you know, people may historically know the whole back and forth that I dealt with. You can look at the Detroit is Different archives of Sue last summer and what myself and maybe about 500 of my neighbors, when we all faced a lawsuit from the Means Logistical Park, which is still an empty building. And I have a strong gut feeling that that's an empty space, because if you Google that site, the first thing you see is my Google video and all these people complaining about what you're doing in this Black community, suing people because of some covenant in the contract of the land. But if you are that developer and you are looking to build that relationship, rest in peace, Eric Means. He passed away before the deal moved forward, and the people that picked up the deal, Ashley Capital and other actors, chose to go the legal route, which they didn't know Detroit is Different was over here, and I chose to go the media route. But how do you start and build that relationship when you say, like, okay, I'm just thinking about doing something over here in this area of this community. I think I have a good business idea. You know, everybody tells me that land is like pennies on the dollar in Detroit. I figure I should be able to do whatever I want to do. I want to start this urban farm. I want to do a slaughterhouse. I want to do whatever my idea is. Where do you begin, Orlando? Like, if I am that developer, how do you get into that community and just start? Do you start with the churches? Do you start with the official CDC of that community? Do you start with a Black club? What do you do?
I mean, you know, coming from community development, I'm going to say, you know, go visit your local community development organization. I think it's imperative for people to go to where residents are already convening, right? Where residents are already building their power and their agency to be able to speak to, control, and vision for what the future of neighborhoods should look like. You go to where the people already are, you submit your idea, right? And then you shut up and listen. And you do a whole lot of it, right? You do a whole lot of listening, right? And you take the time needed. The other thing that happens is every time, at least in my experience, every time there's a development coming, the development is already done, right? Like everything is already in motion, everything is happening, and there is always this tight timetable, right? And these timetables sacrifice the fidelity of being able to really be in relationship with community, right? So what all too often what happens is people come to community and engage in these extractive, mutually beneficial, not even mutually beneficial, but beneficial, one-sided beneficial relationships for the chambers of power, right? And I think we have to figure out another way to do that. And I think organizations like ECN, organizations like the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, like all of these organizations who have been rooted for the last 20 years, 30 years, ECN would be 40 this year, right? ECN has a track record of being able to convene neighborhoods, neighborhood leaders, and corporations, philanthropy, city officials, anybody in power to have conversations, right? It begins with the conversation. So you got to be okay. You have to also be okay if they say no.
Okay, and now this brings to the question. I gotta add some icing on the cake for you. Same question, because I was actually in a discussion last night of a development that's coming that's pretty big, where I was basically echoing a lot of what you said. I was like, you should know the stakeholders in these communities. You should be talking to them directly, and you do have to open up the wallet. And what this person basically said, because this is the other layer, and I want you to speak directly to this, because it's also a discussion, and this happened with the means group too, where it's like, these people want money, and why are we going to pay money for this? When the developers are developing, and it just seems like the budget to go to the community just doesn't exist to pull off the project, and then it can be painted as if the community's just trying to like shake down the development per se.
Did I just read that Stellantis had a record year in profit in 2023?
They getting ready to give out checks.
And but they had a record year in profit. They may be giving out checks, but you know who they don't give it to? The community.
They ain't not giving it to community.
Here's the interesting thing about money and greed. Greed is presupposed to be what drives white folks with money. People will say, well, you can't get innovation done unless you pay people billions of dollars. You can't get it done. The reason we have these stock options and the reason we have these huge salaries is we've got to motivate people. So if I'm rich, money is a reasonable motivation. If I'm black and I'm poor or I'm just living in a community, I'm greedy for wanting the exact same thing that a billionaire wants. Why is it greed when it's a white man who's rich? And it is, when it's not greed, it's just the way the world works, right? This is what people say, well, that's just the way the world works. It's a capitalist nation. Capitalism is supposed to deliver benefits for everybody but black people. Black people are supposed to be grateful for whatever meager crumbs we get. Thank you so much for that $10,000 grant. Thank you so much. This is going to change my life. But we're giving huge tax breaks to billionaires. And that makes sense to us. And there's actually, this study that was just released that says, it just doesn't make sense for people to do development in Detroit unless you give them tax incentives, unless you give them tax abatements, unless you give them grants. And our whole government is, set up to do those types of things. So I think, we have got to accept our right to want good things. We have the same right to want good things as anybody else. There is a mental illness that used to exist. I think they called it drapetomania, where a black person wanted to
Michael
be free.
Harriet. Yep.
A black person who wanted to be free had drapetomania. A white person who wanted to be free was a freedom fighter, a revolutionary, somebody, a founding father. Freedom is problematic for black people, but expected and rewarded in white folks. And that's how racism began.
Everything you're saying, I echo, but I do want you to speak directly to this because I was in this meeting where there was like, look, we don't have any money to give, but we do have some other resources.
Well, they do have money to give. And my point is they have money they're going to get. But here's the thing. People in power are not going to take the time out to organize people without power.
And they don't have to. There's no incentive to right now.
Our job.
That's us.
We have got to be better organized. And again, we've got to come together across all of these lines of division so that we can work effectively. There is no black person in Detroit who benefits from what's happening downtown right now. You almost have no black developers downtown. They're not the ones getting these big tax abatements. They're not the ones getting these incentives. It's almost always white people in a community that is inhabited by almost all white people, in a community where the businesses are almost all white people. So this idea that this is a problem for poor people or this is a problem for middle class people, if you're a developer, you need us. If you're a black banker, you need us, because the reality is that the way that wealth is aggregating in Detroit is only for the 1%. It's for a very small percentage of people. And sometimes they bring a couple of us along for the ride, but we're not getting the main meal. We're just getting crumbs also. So I think that rather than trying to respond to that developer, we have got to organize well enough that we get people elected to official positions and have them understanding that they represent us and hold them accountable when they don't. We have now got these city council districts, and theoretically it's a good thing, right? Because we all have representation. The problem with that is you have a city council person who thinks that they serve people in their district and does not understand their watchdog role for the city of Detroit as a whole. So they're so busy trying to appease the mayor and the mayor's people and the growth corporation because they don't want their district to be punished. that they forget that collectively we are stronger than we are individually. So it's a call to action to city council to act as one and to understand there's nothing in the city charter that says, I don't care what district you think you represent, that you don't represent me too. My tax dollars go to pay for you too. I didn't get to elect you, but it's not like you only get tax dollars and you only get, whatever. So I think it's important for us to read the city charter and understand our rights, and then to act collectively to hold people accountable and to remind people of that, because we want businesses to understand not that they have to convince us, but they have to convince the people who have the power of the pen, the decision-making power to say yes or no, this can't happen. The mayor acts powerless when it serves him. The mayor acts powerful when it serves him. We've got a Detroit Land Bank Authority that the mayor completely controls, whether the mayor acknowledges it or not, right? The mayor is the person who appoints all of the board members, including some mayor staff who depend on him for a job, and they in turn hire the executive director. So we can make sure the land bank is not selling land in ways that we don't want. And it's already happening. I have a friend who is trying to purchase a home in East English Village. She's lived there for 30 years plus. She is an attorney, a senior attorney at an international law firm, and she was trying to buy a home for $40,000 so she could fix it up and give it to her children. Mm-hmm. And the land bank would not sell her that home because they said that it was part of an economic development deal. So they ended up selling it in a bundle to a developer, a black guy, nice guy, to a developer for $20,000. And I talked to them. I said, well, why would you make that decision? And they said, well, the planning department wanted us to hold this land. Well, if the planning department is in control of your decision making, let's not pretend like this is a separate entity. We need our mayor and our city council people to speak and act for the people who elect them. And if you read the city charter, which I did a couple of times recently, businesses have no legal rights in Detroit other than property rights. Mm-hmm. The only rights that are outlined in the city charter are citizens' rights. We have rights.
So that definitely goes right into the next question that up for grabs, either one of you, I should say. The money running for a local election, the coffers, I would imagine, just in my gut, I don't even know offhand, but you're looking at definitely, as they say, some 2 commas if mayor, that's what would be projected, and definitely a strong 1 comma if you're looking at city council. Police commissioner, I think that possibly successfully, maybe 30 G's. You're still going to have to pound the pavement and get out there and walk and do what needs to be done. And then you're going to have clerk. That's probably a 2 comma thing. So the money associated with campaigning, which is really one of my core challenges of this whole American democracy.
Well, but the mayor spent $2 million plus on his last election, right? Mm-hmm. And got fewer than 19% of the people who are eligible to vote to show up. Mm-hmm. Money can't buy votes. It can buy some votes. It can buy recognition. The reality is when people are running for office, if you mobilize 20% of the eligible voters on your own, you would have beat the mayor. He could have had, he got 78% of less than 19% of eligible voters voting for him. That's ridiculous. That's not what democracy looks like. When 83% of the population, 82% of the population is sitting out an election, that tells me that money can only go so far. We have social media. We have people who know how to go viral. We have neighborhood networks. People always look to churches. A lot of churches have commuter populations, but guess what? We have 1,500 members now of the Stoudemire Wellness Hub, and that's just us. You have lots of block clubs and community organizations that if we were able and willing to activate these networks of people, and again, that's community organizing, you can help balance money. The other thing is Barack Obama became president with small dollar donations being the primary donations, especially early on. He started getting the bigger dollars when the smaller dollars started adding up. And social media through emails was really big for him. I think he changed that game. But have we tried it on a Detroit level where we say to ourselves, Detroit is different. Detroit has all of these leaders and all of these pockets of leadership. Why don't we mobilize what we have to make demands? But it starts with organizing and listening to people, because right now there's a whole sector of Detroit that feels like nobody cares. Democracy is a joke. I'm not bothering. If you're running for office and you're not talking about housing, recreation, safety in the same way that people are talking about safety, you're not going to really interest people who can't afford to live in our city right now. You got to have some solutions. And, my husband and I we had dinner last night at Joe Muir's, and we're looking at Windsor, and Windsor has the weakest little downtown. That little weak downtown, they're spending their money not incentivizing business to come downtown. They got free childcare. They have housing subsidies. They have things that we don't have in place here. So right now, our whole political system is really animated by people who have self-interest at heart, and that is self-interest of getting government to do their bidding.
So I like a lot of what you just spoke to, as far as you said it best. Like, you can pound the pavement and end up with some good results toward it. I think the number one thing you can do actually is start early. If you start early and you get it in most people's heads, because, time is just as valuable, if not, time can be a better resource than money. Like, starting out early and staying at it and letting people know, I would think that you should be trying to announce now. If you plan on running this for city council, announce it now. You're going to learn. You're going to end up, even to people that don't agree with you, if you announce today, maybe this summer they're going to be like, you don't know nothing. And then by then you can sort of like get on the right path. So that's the question I have for you all. When do you think a person should be announcing? When should they be organizing? If they're thinking 2025, should they wait like most people? It's like, after I get all my signatures and all of that, like, when should they be letting it known that I'm going to be on the ballot?
Do it now. I agree with you. But I think the most important thing, and I think Orlando talked about this, he was talking about narrative. Mm-hmm. The most important thing for you in building a relationship is listening to people, right? People are so concerned with what people think about them, but voters are concerned with candidates think about them, okay? You got to put people first. I don't care when you start, right? Because, listening and building those relationships may take time, but you've got to listen to people hard to let people know that you care. When you're not showing up in people's neighborhoods, they feel ignored. When you're not listening and then responding to what they're saying. So if you listen to enough people and build those types of grassroots relationships, those people are going to go fight for you, because you can't fight for yourself. What is your plan? What is your vision for a new Detroit? You've got to have a vision beyond what exists right now. You can't be using the same austerity language we hear from the mayor, there is no money. Well, if there's no money, how are we giving all of these tax abatements? If there is no money, how are we building up the Joe Louis Greenway? There's money when we want money. There's money where we want money. And if we decided the sidewalks were as important as greenways, we'd be talking about this, sidewalk program that we have all over the city. Let's get dead trees off of houses. Let's help people repair their roofs. Let's put some real money into that. We can spend $1 billion demolishing homes, but when we start talking about fixing up homes using $1 billion, well, we have all of these asterisks and reasons why we really can't and shouldn't do that. And the current mayor says that's not the role of government to help people maintain their homes. And so I asked the current mayor, if that's not the role of government, then why is it the role of government to build arenas? I just need to understand what you think government's role is, because the city charter says that all people in Detroit should be able to live in decent conditions, free of environmental contamination. They should live safely. The city charter makes that guarantee, and the mayor should use all of the mayor's resources to perform on that guarantee. And we're not seeing that now, as well as city council. So I think message, I think plans, I think vision, I think relationship are as important as money and the start date.
So you say listen. Mm-hmm. What are the questions they're posing? And then as they're listening, because this is the other thing that gets under my skin usually, and usually when my rebuttal possibly make people mad, I think I'm going to try to focus better on this when new candidates come to me, that a lot of people just are misunderstood about the capacity of the role of that they're running for. So the plans they have, it's like, that's more of an executive thing. It's not necessarily a legislative thing. But what are the questions they should be asking? And then is that incumbent upon us to kind of help guide them in all right, if you're council, then this is what you can do? If you're commissioner, this is what you can do. If you're clerk, this is what you can do. A
So
lot
it
of what
starts
you're
with-
saying
it
is
starts with the meta narratives, right? It starts with the meta narratives about what makes cities work. What do cities need? If the meta narratives are, let's build up downtown because building up downtown strengthens the city, and all cities need strong downtowns, and that's the most important thing a city can have.
Yeah.
Then you're never going to do anything that threatens that narrative. If your idea is we need strong neighborhoods and strong neighborhoods are the most important thing a city should have, then you will sometimes challenge downtown development and ensure the narratives. And so as a city council person, you get to approve a budget. As a city council person, you get to approve tax abatements. As a city council person, you get to approve certain types of deals, contracts, other things. You also get to investigate and to document and to have a soapbox where you can stand on and sometimes just throw holy hell at whoever is not giving you what you want. And
a
believe
lot like my
me,
godmother right there.
You know, your godmother and Irma Henderson before, they had no problem. You know, I may not have the power to do this, but I'm going to talk stuff about you because I'm not going to let you get away with this. You can't tell me, oh, this is not in the Constitution. Well, this is not a constitutional power. The Constitution says this. There's no law saying that. But we will go to Lansing and get a law made for transformational brownfield tax credits to give somebody who's a developer downtown, a white man, the right to generate taxable income from people who are working on a site he already doesn't have to pay taxes on, to build something that's going to make him richer. We created that legislation. Transformation of brownfield tax credits would not exist without the same mayor who always wants to throw the law in our face whenever we say we need more of something. So we do need to understand the limitations of power. We also need to learn how to leverage our power, and we need to stop hiding behind those limitations and understand, okay, I get it. You don't get to decide this, but what you can do is you can make people aware of this, and you can hold the mayor's feet to the fire. You can work with the community to organize against certain types of things. We want people, I think many of us, to fight for us, even when we don't have the power alone to win.
You know, one of the things that, you know, I like to ask folks who are running for city council and even current city council members, I was moderating a panel with Letitia Johnson on it at Eastside Community Network, is what is your legislative policy agenda for Lansing? Right. If you are looking and paying attention to any of the city council committees and formal sessions where council wants something to get done, right? And they're sitting there going back and forth with Conrad Mallett, who's the corporation counsel for the city, for the mayor's office, and saying, you know, state law prohibits that. We can't do that because of state law. We can't do that because of the Michigan Constitution. And when it is politically expedient for Duggan to go to Lansing and lobby for legislation to change something that he feels like doesn't work, he does exactly that. When it's not, he does not. But I don't see an impediment for city council members to also go and do the same thing, right? Who are we partnering with in Lansing? Who's a part of your network that you can lobby to draft legislation and beat the drum, beat the pavement to get this legislation passed, make sure that folks are educated about it. Because I listen to city council pretty often because it's part of my job. I am tired of that's against the law. Equity is against the law. That's and you know, this often comes up when we're talking about issues of justice, issues of fairness, issues on equity, right? And it's never lawful for us to legislate locally equity and justice, right? And fairness. And so if you are eyeing a seat on the city council, you need to be just as versed and just as connected to what is happening in Lansing and how to change it, how to infiltrate and get laws coming from the state that work for the citizens of the city of Detroit.
Which naturally bring me to you and I a couple years back did the Tell Us Detroit forum.
Absolutely.
Which was all about listening.
Man. So much fun.
Detroit is different, Bridge Detroit collaboration. Yes. Me and Orlando were in all the hoods.
That was amazing.
And
everywhere. Everywhere.
And the one thing that came up resoundingly as you talk about listening was Detroiters are beyond mad about the overtaxation of the properties. Communities like mine, you can clearly still see the vestiges of that. So this is where it becomes more of a of the platform that make people, as far as I'm concerned, like people in my neighborhood, completely apathetic. Because on one hand, corporate counsel and the mayor have basically said, hey, that's just tough luck. That's tough. We can't do anything because a city cannot pay a person directly for this, right? But let's take this story a little further, especially in a community like mine. That's why I love having podcasts here, because you're looking at the spaces of homes that will be demolished, homes that have been demolished. But some of these homes were taken away from overtaxation, and then paying for the demolishing of the home. Right. And then now I'm in a community of a home that possibly is, people looking for shelter, people scrapping the metal. God knows what's going on in some of these homes and everything. But the city is paying to get this demolished. So you can pay the business, you can't pay the person. Now it's found out that the people were overtaxed and they lost the home. And now we're being told that nothing can be done about that. I remember I called my brother at the time that was the city manager of Baltimore, and I was like, yo, man, because he was over the ARPA funding at the time. And I was like, can ARPA funding pay for these people overtaxed? He was like, yeah, it's in the rule. Let me give you the whole handbook. And then we looked at what Baltimore was doing for their ARPA funding program, where people basically could fill out forms from communities and make decisions about what projects they would like to see done in their communities. Then I went to the Detroit City one. It was completely different. And I was like, I know I'm stirring the pot, because I got some phone calls from some people in the city administration that I didn't even know kept up with the stuff I was doing. But with this being said, I give this long classic Kari question or statement, story before question of one of the things that definitely will be brought up is people are mad as hell over the overtaxation.
Sure they are.
Almost every community meeting I'm in, that's still the topic. Well, and it's not being heard from a lot of local politicians, where it's not even being spoken to directly anymore, because it's just being looked at as if we can just disregard this.
See, part of the problem is we're only telling half the story. And the mayor has found a way to try to play one group of people against the other. Those who paid their taxes and those who didn't, whether they should have or not. But the reality is, if you're a homeowner and you paid your taxes and did everything you were supposed to do, and the people next door to you didn't, your home lost value too. They robbed you. Because anytime you have a demolition or tax foreclosure, the value of the remaining homes declines. That means your wealth declines. So the city's policy of, all of these tax foreclosures and stuff like that, he says, well, it's not fair to the people who paid their taxes to reward people who didn't pay their taxes, as if that's what's happening. As opposed to understanding that the policy...
Why is that the rebuttal for overtaxation? We're not even talking about...
The rebuttal for overtaxation is that those debts were discharged by bankruptcy, because this happened prior to my term, and it wouldn't be fair to the people of Wayne County, because Wayne County received some of this. The schools received some of that. The mayor has a way of marginalizing people who have been harmed and pitting the rest of the city against those people. It's not fair to people who pay taxes. All of us, anybody in the city of Detroit, was harmed by these practices, not just one group of people.
I do have to step in. As living on this block, and I feel, and I guess this may be my community statement of it, and I've even started doing this, I tested the model with my shows and stuff when I was performing more. I don't care. I want somebody to live in that house down the street from me.
That's my point.
If I pay $4,000 and that person pays $2, I mean, we'll joke about it, but I'd rather have somebody there than it being unoccupied or owned by the bank or owned by the city, because when it's usually owned by the bank, owned by a bank, or owned by the city, I'm dealing with other challenges that I'd rather not have. Keep that home in the families where it needs to be.
Exactly. The reality is that I've never talked to anybody. We do this. I haven't gone all over the city. I've talked to people inside of neighborhoods on the east side of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And when they talk about losing neighbors, when they talk about homes being torn down, tears come to their eyes. It's a loss. It's a grief. It's something that they did not want to see happen. I don't know people in the community who are celebrating the tax foreclosure crisis, the demolition, mass demolitions. I think many people feel that the government is so divided for doing things that are so opposed to what they want to see that they don't really care. What's the point of voting? And I kind of feel, kind of like this year, and I'm, don't want to talk too much about the presidential election, but I was listening to The Daily Show on Monday. John.
I just listened to it.
It was
funny.
iconic, wasn't it? It was
funny.
so great. And he said, look, it's February and we already know who the candidates are. When does that happen? Okay.
Yeah.
This is our democracy is so weak that you have A or B, and if you don't want either one of them, not voting feels like your only option or voting third party. And it's the same thing with these local elections where people feel as though they're not given the kind of meaningful choices that will produce change for them. I want people to run for office who have a vision for how to help repair the damage that was done by predatory lending, mass bank foreclosures, mass tax foreclosures, and overtaxation.
Wow.
I want somebody to come with a clear understanding of these are the things I can do. I am so tired of hearing what you cannot do, what is not legal to do, what is not fair to do, as though somehow there's anything about this government in our city right now that's concerned about fairness.
I mean, historically, I would say just the lens of America. Like I always say, this is a gangster nation. You know what I'm saying? It's stolen land, stolen labor, a stolen loan. Y'all know I always say this on Detroit is different, but it's just the truth. So and then it establishes laws on precedent after all of this stuff happens. So even the reality that we as Black folks will have to live in when the I-75, when the 375 Greenway comes to life, and I'm sure they'll put like a lot of art there. I mean, I may even do a presentation there, but it's still going to be surreal that it's like, okay, 1 second. We're honoring the people that had to deal with the atrocity of this by returning it back to what it was supposed to be, while we have a municipal government that says we can't do anything and give any money directly back to those people, but we can honor them with some form of presentation.
We can honor them while enriching ourselves, gaslighting American style, right? There's the reality is you're creating more real estate to enrich more of your buddies. This whole process, the amount of money it's going to take to do that is enormous, but Detroit is different, right? Detroit is an innovative city. And I think it's important for us to understand we don't just have to look to other cities to figure out how things are done. We can figure some things out ourselves. And I really hope that we see that kind of ingenuity flowing through some of this dialogue where people are saying, this is how we can use our dollars differently. But I also think those of us on the ground, we're smart. Why don't we come up with some ideas and begin pushing those ideas on candidates next year and asking them to pledge to do some of the things that we think need to be done?
I like it. Just from Donna saying that and just from that Baltimore idea, okay, it's going to be probably like a Google form or something, or some type of form that will be created via Detroit is Different, Authentically Detroit. It's probably going to be getting to you guys sometime soon after the mayor's State of the City address, where we're going to just start polling some questions and we're going to start listening through those forms, and it'll just arm, we're going to interview a lot of these candidates.
Well, wouldn't it be fun? Do you want to do a rebuttal or just sit there and listen to it and then respond?
Oh, he's planning a rebuttal already.
You already planned your rebuttal.
But we're going to do this whole thing. I was going to do it basically public comment style, but let's do, I'm thinking we can do a form. We can start pulling.
Partner on that? I would
let's
love to partner with you on that. I think that this is, because I'm trying to get something going. You already know this, Kari and Orlando, and it's not me. I think us. I think the Black Detroit Democracy Project, we come together as Black Detroiters and we try to retake democracy for our city and understand what democracy looks like. And I don't really care about laws. There was a time when Harriet Tubman was breaking the law. There was a time when, Dr. Sweet was breaking the law. There's times that people break laws because laws should be broken, and some laws are so darn unjust and really designed to disadvantage us. Our desire to try to, I love what you were discussing with the means building and the way you said, I'm just going to take it to the streets. I'm going to take it and put it out there. The problem is I don't even know what you're talking about. And so I think part of it is also us publicizing some of this even beyond the circles that we have so that more people understand what's happened.
Yeah, I do think that that's where, our voices are getting stronger. The content creation, media voice, we can give a narrative. And that's where I urge of everyone that's running to not be afraid to actually speak, to engage. I think whether you agree, like, dislike me, Orlando, Donna, you should be definitely, if you plan on doing some work in this city, connect with us. We're easy to reach out to, and let's have that discussion. And not just us, it's others too. Like, it's certain community voices where connecting with them and sharing what that perspective is. But it's going to be more. So as we get to a close here, more will definitely be coming. But I do want to hit, I brought back my classic Detroit is different question, so I want to hit Donna with that. But before that, Orlando, you want to give any 2 cents to what we speaking about as they see, it's like y'all seeing like the kitchen come together a little bit. We gave a piece of what's to come. You want to give some information or parting?
Well, on the election tip, I would say you can't be scared of the people you're trying to serve.
Oh man, that's really heavy too.
You cannot be afraid of the people you're trying to serve. Hit the streets. Stop being a punk. I'm serious. Get the doors closed in your face. If you love us, you have to take us in all of our complexity, nuance, trauma, joy, exuberance, all of it. Stop being scared.
Yeah.
And get outside.
Yeah, we was canvassing for that. Tell us the trick.
We canvass every year. And, one of the things, I ran the canvassing effort at ECN, and I brought that same mindset to the newsroom. And what was so funny, journalists don't know anything about that, right? Mm-hmm. But we have been able to sort of, build this culture where now that's expected. We got to hit the streets, and we got to hear the good, the bad, the indifferent, and the ugly. And so many people would rather figure out a way to go around the people.
Damn, that's
to
deep.
Go around the people, to try to get, money. We were just talking about it, to go around the people rather than facing it. Hear what needs to be said and adjust accordingly. Stop being scared. Stop being scared of Detroiters. Right?
You know what kills me?
What?
Is when you have people taking $2,000, $3,000 and selling out for $3,000.
That part,
I promise you, if I'm going to sell out, it's going to be so many millions of dollars. I'm not going to sell out. But when you see people selling out cheap, it's like, what?
You went to jail for that? Okay. And so I think you voted this way for that. I think a good ground game can do numbers beyond what anybody is feeding a campaign in terms of monetary dollars, right?
And wait, so, let me add a caveat to that. I gotta do classic Detroit is different because it's fresh in my mind from a recent interview with Shelley McIntosh that was at the Shrine of the Black Madonna soon after the Black Slate, and she shared a story that I was like, damn, this is powerful. You need the community, especially if you're Black, because this machine ain't designed for you. The minute that Coleman Young took office, the day he took office, the police union went on strike immediately. So the minute that the police union went on strike, Coleman Young was like, I know who exactly I'm gonna call. I'm going to call the Shrine of Black Madonna, and we're going to get them people down here in the red, black, and green suits, men, women, and everything. And as you would imagine, the police union, once a lot of those businesses saw people in red, black, and green and positions for security, you'd be surprised how soon the police union was like, let's negotiate with this black man.
That's what I'm saying. So many people, so many politicians, so many people in power plan their interactions and their meetings around confrontation and around trauma. And confrontation is a good thing. I think we have done away with being able to lean into the conflict and lean into the tension. And I think if you're going to be successful in this city, if people are really going to connect with you, you're going to have to lean in. You're going to have to lean into the trauma, the confrontation, all of it. Confrontation, you know what I'm saying? Like it's also a part, and it's also a reality of what is going on in this city, right? We have to be able to confront. Stop planning around that. Stop planning around we plan around disruption. No, embrace the disruption, embrace this tension, right? Because it needs to happen.
As a person that people definitely throw the activist hat on me. If I show up someplace and give a presentation and Brenda Butler don't pull me to the side and tell me what I got wrong, then something is off that day.
I'm trying to listen,
Brenda gonna always be like,
I call Brenda Butler the unofficial president CEO of Eastside Community Network because she's always running around somewhere telling everybody what to do. But here's the thing about a Brenda Butler. we don't plan around Brenda Butler. We build relationship
Yes.
with Brenda Butler so
Yes.
that we can speak to her,
Yeah.
right, and respond to her,
Yeah.
and make sure that she feels heard, but also have that relationship to be able to say, okay, Brenda, we gonna go to somebody else. You good? We heard you. Now you know what I mean? Like that's how we're able to facilitate change.
Yeah.
That's how we're able to
Yeah.
facilitate relationships in community. How are we scared of Brenda
We
Butler?
need to get rid of the gatekeepers. So I'm sorry.
Yep.
And even I love Brenda Butler, but when she acts like a gatekeeper, we got to get around her too. We have a whole generation of young people who are doing stuff that blows my mind, and they're not doing it the way we did it. They're not thinking the way we did. They're younger than young, and they just have these visions and
Yeah.
do things. One of the things we're afraid of in our community is our youth. We always
Stop
want
being
to take
scared of
them
young
back to
people.
the civil rights movement in 1960s. It is 2024, and
But
their
those were young
ideas-
people.
They were young people
yeah.
then, and the old people, they're not young now,
Right.
and they need to not get in the way
Talk.
of young people who are trying to change, because our future cannot be in our past, okay? I don't care about the glory days, because the glory days were not glorious for everybody. There has never been a time in our history where we have not been oppressed as a people. Even when we had better mayoral and city council leadership, we were still dealing with some of the same enemies. We were still harmed as a people. And so when you have young people, one of the things that the young people are the ones who are not voting. Young people are the ones who have given up. Young people, they don't. And you tell them your ancestors died for the right to vote, and they want to give you
not
the
checking in
finger
for that.
because they're thinking to themselves, you know what? I voted and voted and voted. I voted and my mother lost her house. I voted and my grandmother lost her house. I voted and I watched this neighborhood go down and people get overtaxed. I don't care about this system as it is.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in how do we build bridges between Brenda Butler and young people, and I'm not really talking about Brenda specifically.
I know, but you're speaking. What you're speaking to is that's definitely assumed guest here too. But what you're speaking to, I know exactly what you're speaking to. The value proposition, because you're right. A lot of younger people, and I've been one of those people, and I've definitely dealt with the brunt of a lot of debates. Me and my dad almost got into almost like a physical altercation over like, I ain't voting because it's nothing to vote for. I'm done picking lesser of two evils, and then having that debate of, but your people died. And I'm like, nah, they died for free. As you said, they died because this was a tool that they saw as a gateway to freedom. And now that's been exhausted. And a lot of the value proposition with voting for especially a lot of younger people now, especially from what has been presented as this is what you're going to get. And then what they get is just tougher because it's not as, they're not seeing that value proposition come
And this
back.
this is a love letter to Brenda. When you interview Brenda, Brenda's story is one of the most fascinating stories. She had me get a book because of her grandfather. Absolutely fascinating. I'm not talking about Brenda.
Oh, no, but we're using it
hold on.
as a concept.
Let me talk about one of her peers. I'm on an email listserv with 146 people. And this one young lady who has purchased, renovated 16 homes, closed down two crack houses, organized community cleanups, everything like that. Young lady started a block clubs, won an award last year at our Eastside Extravaganza, gets checked by an older woman in the community who says, quit sending these emails to people. They don't know you. You're loud and obnoxious in the 9th precinct meetings, and basically tells her that she's illegitimate and to stop what she's doing in front of 146 people on an email listserv. There is no way that was an appropriate way to respond to a young lady who is trying to make change. Fixed up, she got her builder's license, graduated from Denby High School, got her builder's license, again, purchased and fixed up 15 homes on her own, moved her mother and mom's a homeowner now. Amazing story. And we have got to lean into people like her and ask her to keep on being amazing. And she's not the only one. I'm always so shocked by the fact that so many young people have these great ideas for how to change the world, and they're never given the opportunity. And if you want to stop pushing people out of our community and you want to make our community better, you've got to bring them in.
Yeah.
There's a role for you if you're older. There's a role for me. But there's a role for a young person who is not afraid to put everything on the line to make change in our community.
All right. So with that, I'm going to hit you with the closeout questions. So your very first car, year, make, and model, and year you got it.
Ooh-wee. My first car was a Ford Escort. I got it in 1982, and it was probably 1979.
Okay. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Ooh, I don't know. I was in school at University of Michigan.
So you went to school,
I
probably.
probably went to college. Yeah, back to college.
Okay. You didn't go like a joyride. All right.
I may have. It's been a minute. Okay.
Okay, I got you. All right, you're the DJ at the end of the fireworks at Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What 2 songs you playing?
One Nation Under a Groove,
I'm with that.
Jamaica Funk.
Okay, you got the people partying. It's like Donna's the party DJ. We know that.
I will say this. You know, I have all kinds of things I love about Detroit, but let me tell you, I love nothing more than Detroit summers, backyard parties, basement parties, all of that. Detroit was a fun place to be a young person for me.
Okay.
And I really love to see that with young people. That's why I'm always trying to get young people to have parties, you know, because
Hilarious.
that's part of youth. You're supposed to party. You're supposed to listen to music and have fun. Our work is hard. We deal with all these serious issues, but at the end of the day, we need to celebrate our culture. And for me, my culture is One Nation Under a Groove. I mean, I have a playlist.
Okay, I'm with it. So were you like so I'm guessing you was dancing in these said parties too. You wasn't just like wallflower. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, and last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Ooh. My goodness. Oh my goodness, that's a really, really hard question, but I would say Irma Henderson.
Okay.
Henderson Avenue.
I like it, but why?
Oh, she was such a tremendous leader, and she organized the Women's Conference of Concerns. She did things, and one time I asked young people who worked for me, some of them, I said, do you know who Irma Henderson was? And they couldn't name who she was, and it broke my heart because we all know Coleman Young, and Black women contribute, and then they die in ignominy, and it's like, how do we let this happen? I think that she was one of the most influential Detroiters to ever live, and one of the most influential Detroiters I ever observed. She helped mold for me a desire to be like her. I was in high school going to meetings with my grandmother for the Women's Conference Concerns and looking at this woman like, wow. And so I think we need to elevate her memory. Black women have never really been celebrated like we should be in our town. We've never had a Black woman mayor. We have a very, to me, a very paternalistic kind of culture here. But she is one who always stood up for the people, and she was gracious. All the right things.
Definitely. That is an excellent pick. You definitely don't get no pushback. That was my godmama almost. So like,
Right,
yeah, but
exactly,
both of
right.
them, because her and Orthea Barnes would be taking turns
Ooh.
interacting with her,
Orthea
so they would
Barnes,
tell all these
excellent.
different stories. So you know what I'm saying.
Titans.
You get a different Irma Henderson story from Mama Barnes than you get from Mama Watson.
You know what?
I bet.
You know, one of the things that's so interesting about you is that you have been around so many people, and so we need to get you back on Authentically Detroit so we can hear some of these stories. I absolutely think your stories are fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, it's all types of. Now I got Orlando stories too. So
Listen, I know we got to go, Kari, but I wouldn't be the person I am if I did not pub that Authentically Detroit podcast has started a book club. We have started a book club, and we want you to join our book club. You can go to authenticallydec.com to join us. Right now, we are reading Black AF by Michael Harriot.
Okay.
Just a version of history that should be told the way that he's telling it.
Okay.
And we are having our book club meeting at Next Chapter Books on Monday, February 26th at 4 p.m. And we're also going to be broadcasting live from there. So come on out. Read this book with us. It's really cool. Go to Next Chapter Books. You can get it on a discount when you mention Authentically Detroit.
I'm with it. And if you guys ever start the album club too, Detroit is different. Got to be a part of the mix of that.
Okay, wait.
Wait, what you mean?
wait.
Like, say more.
Like the album club, meaning like it's new music.
New
and sometimes
music?
people don't connect, but like a full album.
I just want to do that. I want to say how significant that is to me in so many ways. A couple things about me, right, that we didn't get to. One of them is I used to be a mentor. When I was vice president for programs of Big Brothers Big Sisters, I was a youth mentor, and along with Charlonda Buckman, and we'd have these teenagers on a weekend. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I loved doing is I'd say, okay, bring your favorite music, and I'm going to bring my favorite music, and you're going to tell me why you like it. And so we used to have those dialogues. It was always important to me not to condemn young people's music because of the content, right? Because I figured I loved Prince, I loved Parliament, I loved all of the, I loved, all kinds of music, Ohio Players, whatever.
Like, this is maggot brain.
And maggot brain, that's right. And so, I think we need to let young people be young. The other thing is that when I was at Vanguard Community Development Corporation, we actually got some money from the state and we sponsored a play, I Want My Music Now, that spoke to generational divides around music.
Wow.
And it was really a powerful play. It was amazing. We got all community actors. Dorothea Sharon was the person who produced the whole thing. It was one day at Sherrard Elementary, and nobody thought to record it. And we only did it once. But it was really, really meaningful to me. So I think music is how we express so much of who we are. And that understanding people's music gives you a window into their souls. And so I would love to be part of the album club where we're really looking at. And the final thing is that so much of what we listen to now as music is determined by white music executives who don't know or love us. And they can push narratives that can be very damaging to our communities if we're not careful. And so I think that alternative music, listening to stuff that's locally made and that is not always on the radio, which I don't listen to the radio, allows us to empower the voices of people who just don't get heard. Because hip-hop isn't dead. It's the hip-hop industry that's dead.
Okay. All right. Donna just threw all the sauce on. So now it's like really got to have, it went from an idea that would have been cool that we'd have probably talked about like next year and the next year after that to like, yeah, I guess this album club will be getting started soon.
We love working with you, Kari. No, we do. We love working with you.
Yeah.
We appreciate your platform. We appreciate the people that you give platform to.
Thank you.
And just the perspective that you always bring to the table. And so we're always happy. I am
too.
always happy to work with you and partner with you on whatever we can come to.
Listen, black people love greens, hair, and music. And you got the greens and the hair. We need to add the music to the mix.
Collard green cook-off. I was coming from
Orlando came like
where the greens?
Orlando didn't even taste the winter green.
Man, but I tasted some good ones.
He got some good ones though. It's like he had pot liquor of the winter greens. He was pot liquor shots. Like, give me some of that pot liquor, Buddha.
I know.
What is going on?
They got pictures of me. Stuff in my face.
All right, with all of that, definitely till next time. Thank you both. Peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.